The city of Manhattan never sleeps, but on that November night it seemed quieter than usual. The golden lights of the skyscrapers reflected in the rain puddles, as if the city itself were quietly weeping. Among shadows and damp sidewalks, Elliot huddled beside his pile of cardboard boxes, trying to shield himself from the biting wind. His fingers were cracked, his beard unkempt, his shoes worn and soaked, a detail that, for most people, made him invisible. But he didn't feel invisible. He felt the city alive, watching every step, every gesture, every distant shadow that moved. Across town, in the penthouse of a luxurious building, Lucas Montgomery stared at the city with the tired eyes of someone born into a golden world, but carrying a void that no amount of money could fill. The only son of a billionaire family, surrounded by parties, public appearances, and endless meetings, Lucas lived as a prisoner of his own last name. That night, after a tense argument with his father about the company's succession, he felt an urgent need to breathe outside the closed circuit of his life. He put on elegant boots, adjusted his overcoat, and decided to walk the streets without security, searching for something he couldn't quite define: peace, fresh air, perhaps just anonymity. He didn't know that this walk would lead him to a moment he would never forget. At 11:47 p.m., at the corner of 9th Avenue and West 34th Street, the paths of the two men crossed. Lucas, lost in thought, almost stumbled on the wet sidewalk. Elliot, leaning against a wall with eyes that carried years of distrust and pain, noticed something no ordinary passerby would see: a black van strategically parked, windows shut, and two men with cold expressions observing every move. A metallic glint, the shine of a gun under a distant streetlight, sent a chill down Elliot's spine. Instinct. He had learned to read the streets, to sense danger where no one else could. And that night, danger had a name, but not a familiar face. Lucas kept walking, unaware of the imminent threat. Elliot could have turned away, ignored it. After all, the city always ignored him. But something inside him, perhaps a dormant moral compass, awakened. He felt it was the moment to act, even without knowing exactly how. In seconds, their hearts began to beat in rhythm with the pulse of the city. Elliot decided to move. One step, two steps, eyes sharp, breath controlled. He didn't know it yet, but that decision would not only save Lucas's life, it would change both of their destinies forever. The van remained silent. Time seemed to slow down, and light snow began to fall, covering the scene with a thin white layer. The homeless man everyone ignored would become, in minutes, the unlikely hero of a story no one would believe if told. But no one could predict that in the shadows of that silent corner, a simple act of courage would trigger a chain of events that would transform not only the life of a millionaire heir, but also Elliot's very soul. Before Elliot became invisible to the city, he had a life that in the eyes of many seemed perfect. Born in a small town in Pennsylvania, Elliot grew up in a simple but solid family. His father, a war veteran, was a man of strict discipline who believed that character and courage were values that could not be compromised. His mother, a literature teacher, taught him to see the world with sensitivity, to find beauty in small details, and to trust in people's kindness. As a teenager, Elliot already showed a strong sense of responsibility. He worked part-time to help at home, while studying and playing sports. He was known as a reliable, determined young man with an easy smile, but eyes that carried a weight of maturity few understood. He dreamed of a career that would allow him to serve others, to protect those in need, and at the same time explore the world beyond his hometown. At 22, Elliot enlisted in the armed forces. He served bravely on multiple missions overseas, where the reality of war showed him horrors no book could teach. He was decorated twice for acts of heroism, risky rescues, quick decisions that saved lives. But each medal came with a shadow no one could see. Endless sleepless nights, sudden flashbacks, and nightmares that made him wake up drenched in sweat. During a particularly delicate mission, Elliot lost close comrades due to an unexpected command decision. The guilt consumed him. When he returned home, he was no longer the confident young man he had once been. He carried invisible scars that shaped his worldview, making him introspective and wary. His wife Rachel tried to help him, but the man who returned from service was someone she barely recognized. They drifted apart and divorce became inevitable. Back in civilian life, Elliot struggled to readapt. The work that once filled him with pride now seemed meaningless in the cold, mechanical rhythm of the city. He tried opening a small mechanic shop, but the market and bureaucracy quickly crushed his efforts. One missed rent turned into two, friends disappeared, and little by little the dignity he once held began to slip through his fingers. During his first months on the streets, Elliot felt the city's contempt as a physical weight. People walked by, averting their eyes, ignoring his existence. The wind cut through his bones, the rain turned his clothes into heavy rags. He slept in shelters when possible, but many nights were spent curled up in cardboard boxes, watching the city pulse above him, alive and indifferent. Despite the harshness, Elliot found small sparks of humanity that kept him going. An old lady sharing a hot soup, a young man offering a blanket. Small gestures of kindness reminded him of who he had once been, someone capable of courage and compassion. Each action, no matter how small, rekindled the moral compass that had never truly gone out. Amid hunger, cold, and loneliness, Elliot began to observe the world more carefully. He noticed patterns, sensed dangers others couldn't, understood the dynamics of the streets, of people, of choices. It was as if the city itself had become a school of survival, and he was both student and teacher. And it was precisely this attention to detail, this alertness, that on that cold November night in Manhattan would make him notice the danger approaching Lucas Montgomery. Elliot didn't know that this instinct, trained by hardship and years of war, would turn him into the unlikely hero who would not only save a millionaire's life, but also rediscover his own worth. Each step he took through the shadows, each controlled breath, each calculated movement, wasn't just about survival. It was about proving to himself that goodness and courage still lived within him, and on that silent corner, he would feel the chance to reconnect with his own humanity, unaware that in that single act, two worlds would collide forever. Lucas Montgomery lived in a world many would call a dream. Luxury penthouses, high-performance cars, dinners with influential figures, and parties that lit up the entire city. But behind the crystal and sophistication, there was a deep emptiness. Every laugh at social events sounded fake, every applause felt distorted, and every hug carried a silent expectation. He had to be perfect, efficient, unshakable. On that November day, Lucas had just left another family meeting that left his head spinning. His father, a strict and controlling man, kept pressuring him about the family business. Every word was measured, every decision questioned, and the pressure was unbearable. Lucas loved his father, but he loved even more the freedom he never had. The weight of a massive fortune and family legacy suffocated him. He walked through the penthouse halls in silence, staring at Manhattan's skyline through the apartment's windows. The city's cold wind seemed to hit the glass, carrying a distant, almost imperceptible lament, as if the city itself shared his discomfort. Lucas remembered his childhood, expensive toys, international trips, designer clothes. But he also remembered the lonely nights, the absent father, and the distant mother occupied with social engagements. He grew up learning to hide his feelings, to smile when he didn't want to follow orders he never understood. This upbringing shaped the man now walking through Manhattan's cold streets searching for something he couldn't name. The young millionaire tried to ease the tension by walking alone. The streets, bathed in the golden glow of lampposts, seemed to embrace him, even though he felt out of place. He passed by closed cafes, gleaming store windows, and parked luxury cars, but none of it filled the void inside. The city was a stage, and Lucas was an actor without his own script. He reflected on his recent choices: risky business deals, contracts signed without enthusiasm, endless meetings with lawyers and investors. Every decision felt small compared to the immense legacy he was expected to uphold. Deep down, Lucas wondered, will I ever find something that truly makes me feel alive? Without realizing, he reached a dimly lit corner, away from heavy traffic and curious eyes. The wind stung his face, and the sense of isolation grew with each step. Lost in thoughts about responsibility, family expectations, and the weight of his fortune, he walked forward, unaware that his life was about to intersect with someone who, despite living in the harshest conditions, carried an inner strength he had never known. From across the street, Elliot observed every step, every movement, with sharpened attention. To passers-by, Lucas was just another stranger, but to Elliot, something was different. He noticed subtle details: the way the young man walked, the slight tremor of his hands under the coat, the distant look caught between the concrete and the streetlights. The tension in the air was almost tangible. A black van remained parked silently, waiting for the right moment. Lucas walked straight into danger, unaware of the reality closing in. Elliot breathed deeply, every muscle prepared, every instinct alert. Lucas's life was about to depend on a man the city had forgotten, a man no one had noticed until then. At that moment, Lucas had no idea that this nighttime walk, seemingly trivial, would be the catalyst for a turning point that would change his view of humanity. He could never have predicted that a single act of courage from a stranger, invisible to the city, would be the key to awakening something he thought was lost forever. As Elliot prepared to act, Lucas took his next step, and the line between safety and danger became almost imperceptible. The city kept pulsing around them indifferent, but on that silent corner, two worlds were about to collide irreversibly. The corner of 9th Avenue and West 34th Street seemed frozen in time. Fine snow fell slowly, covering the asphalt and the wet tires of the black van parked nearby. A streetlight illuminated the scene partially, casting long, distorted shadows on the walls of the surrounding buildings. Every detail was in the right place, as if the city itself conspired to prepare a silent stage where only two men would become protagonists. Elliot moved in the shadows, each step calculated, breathing deeply to control his racing heart. His eyes scanned the perimeter once again. The van, two men motionless inside, Lucas's position, distracted and completely vulnerable. He knew that any mistake could be fatal. Every fiber of his body was on alert. Years of living on the streets and military training had prepared him for moments like this. Lucas kept walking, oblivious to the tension, lost in thoughts about pressure, responsibility, and an existential emptiness that money could never fill. He adjusted his coat, unaware of the danger approaching silently. Elliot noticed the slightest movement of one man's hand inside the van, a metallic glint reflecting the light from the street lamp. Pure instinct. Without thinking, he moved forward. First a quick step, almost invisible in the shadows, then another, keeping his body low and silent. Every step was calculated, every muscle tense, ready to react. One of the men got out of the van, gesturing, trying to get Lucas's attention. Elliot spotted the movement and positioned himself between Lucas and the danger, his body slightly hunched, eyes fixed on the attackers. Time seemed to slow down. The noise of the city faded away, leaving only the sound of falling snow and Elliot's heartbeat syncing with the moment's tension. Elliot realized he needed a distraction. He grabbed an empty can from the ground and threw it against a nearby container. The loud clang echoed between the buildings, diverting the attacker's attention for a few precious seconds. Lucas, confused, looked around, not understanding exactly what was happening. Taking advantage of the moment, Elliot grabbed Lucas by the arm and pulled him back, hiding him partially behind a parked car. Lucas finally realized the imminent danger. His heart raced, adrenaline surged, and he caught sight of the black van again. Now closer, more threatening. "Run, now," Elliot whispered, almost swallowing each word so the armed men wouldn't hear. Lucas hesitated for a moment, confused and in shock, but the determination in Elliot's eyes pushed him forward. He moved quickly, following the homeless man who had emerged from the shadows like a figure straight out of a film. Each step was heavy with cold, tension, and the awareness that one wrong move could cost him his life. The attackers reacted, but Elliot had studied their movements. He blocked one approach, dodged another, and used the street itself as an improvised maze. Small environmental details, boxes, poles, cars, became tools of survival. Finally, after a few minutes that felt like an eternity, Elliot managed to lead Lucas into a narrow side street, out of the van's immediate reach. Both stopped, gasping for air, hearts pounding, bodies trembling from both the cold and the adrenaline. Lucas looked at Elliot, trying to process what had just happened. You saved my life." Lucas's voice was trembling, a mix of shock and gratitude. Elliot just nodded, quickly scanning the surroundings before leaning against the wall. He knew they weren't completely safe yet, and disappearing quickly was essential. Lucas wanted to ask questions, to understand who this man was who had stood between him and death without hesitation. But Elliot didn't respond. He simply vanished into the shadows, leaving Lucas alone, still confused, but alive. In that moment, Lucas felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Pure gratitude, mixed with a deep shock at life's fragility. He realized that, despite all his money, security, and power, someone invisible to society had risked his life for him. Elliot, on the other hand, felt something he hadn't felt in years. A sense of purpose, the confirmation that even on the streets, he could make a difference. Every decision he had made, every obstacle he had faced, had led to that moment of silent courage. The van slowly disappeared around the corner, but the impact of that night would mark them both forever. Lucas now knew that humanity could emerge from the most unexpected places, and Elliot would remember that feeling of doing the right thing, even without immediate recognition. Unknowingly, an invisible bond was beginning to form between the millionaire heir and the homeless man the city had forgotten. A bond that, in the weeks to come, would transform lives, defy expectations, and show that true courage isn't measured by money but by the willingness to act when everything seems lost. When the van disappeared around the corner and the shadow swallowed Elliot, Lucas stood trembling, his heart pounding in his chest. Every muscle in his body seemed to remind him of the vulnerability he'd felt just seconds earlier. Seconds that could have been fatal. He breathed rapidly, trying to organize his swirling thoughts. Fear, shock, confusion, and overwhelming gratitude. He saved my life," Lucas muttered, still in shock. But who was this man? Where had he gone? Why had he risked everything for someone he didn't even know? The questions piled up, but there were no immediate answers. Lucas backed into a nearby building entrance, leaning against the cold wall. The icy wind cut his face, but he barely felt the temperature. All that mattered was the presence of that stranger, the silent courage that had made the difference. For the first time, his life of wealth and power felt irrelevant compared to the human value he had just witnessed. In the hours that followed, Lucas returned home, still trembling, each step reminding him of the danger he had escaped. He passed through security, elevators, and luxurious corridors, but his mind was miles away. The golden walls of the apartment offered no comfort. He sat by the window, staring at the city that had just revealed an invisible world, the world Elliot lived in. Meanwhile, Elliot disappeared silently into Manhattan's icy streets. Each step was calculated, each corner observed, every noise evaluated. He wasn't seeking recognition. Doing the right thing was reward enough. But something in his heart felt different. An old, forgotten sense of purpose and connection. The next morning, the case began to attract attention. Small reports appeared on social media. Witnesses claimed to have seen a strange man intervening in a dangerous situation. Blurry security camera images showed a hooded silhouette, but no one knew who he was. Lucas Montgomery's name was mentioned discreetly in some outlets, raising public curiosity. The media, even without all the details, began to build the narrative of the mysterious hero. Lucas, however, wasn't concerned with fame or recognition. He was consumed by a deep need to find the man who had saved him. His thoughts returned to that moment. The determined look, the precise movements, the instinct that had protected him. He felt that life had placed him in front of someone he needed to meet, and he wouldn't rest until he discovered who he was. Meanwhile, those close to Lucas noticed his sudden change. Normally reserved, he began asking discreet questions about the intervention the previous night, trying to search records, contacting police and street sources, reconstructing every detail of what had happened. His obsession wasn't mere curiosity, it was profound gratitude. Elliot, on the other hand, returned to anonymity. He spent the day watching the bustling city, observing pedestrians, children playing in snowy parks, and small acts of kindness happening around him. He reflected on his instincts, on the courage born from experience, pain, and street life. A subtle smile appeared on his face because even invisible, he knew he had done something extraordinary. Between the two of them, an invisible bond was forming. Lucas began imagining scenarios, planning ways to find him, while Elliot remained in the alleys and sidewalks, unaware of the quiet fame building around his act of courage. By the end of the day, Lucas wrote a message to his security team and assistants. "We need to find the man who saved my life. This isn't about money, it's about justice, gratitude, and humanity." Elliot, without realizing it, had become the key to a much greater transformation, not only in Lucas's life but in his own, showing that courage, empathy, and decisive action can emerge from the most unexpected places. The city continued its indifferent rhythm, but something had changed at that silent corner. Two opposite worlds had touched, and in the following weeks, this invisible connection would begin to change everything. In the days after the incident, Lucas Montgomery couldn't shake the image of the man who had saved him. Every detail of the encounter remained vivid. The way he moved through the shadows, his calm amid danger, the watchful eyes that seemed to see far beyond the surface. Lucas searched through records from that night, reviewing security footage and police reports. The black van had vanished without a trace, and the armed men were never identified. But Lucas didn't care about the van or the attackers. He wanted to find the man who had risked his life expecting nothing in return. "He saved more than my life," Lucas told himself. "He reminded me what humanity means." Lucas began involving himself with local homeless assistance organizations, partly to find clues, partly to understand the world Elliot came from. He spoke with volunteers, visited shelters, studied street patterns, all in search of any information about the mysterious savior. Each detail, each clue, fueled his determination. Meanwhile, Elliot continued his daily routine on Manhattan's streets, invisible to most. He observed the city's flow, people's habits, and the small acts of kindness or selfishness that made up urban life. He felt a mix of solitude and renewed purpose. He wasn't seeking recognition. Doing what was right was enough. But there was something different in this feeling, like a bigger story was about to unfold without him realizing it. On one of these walks, Elliot noticed small signs of Lucas. Volunteers talking about a young millionaire intrigued by the lives of the homeless. Rumors on the streets about the man who had saved someone important. Elliot smiled faintly. Lucas's world and his own were beginning to draw closer, even indirectly. Lucas constantly faced obstacles. His family didn't understand his obsession with the unknown man. Lawyers and assistants tried to convince him it was a waste of time. But he felt this search was about justice and human connection, something beyond wealth or status. Meanwhile, Elliot began to notice that small gestures in his everyday life were having an impact. An elderly woman managed to cross the street safely thanks to his quiet guidance. Children received small, unnoticed acts of help. These moments reinforced his belief that doing the right thing, even without recognition, was the right path. One day, Lucas decided to personally visit a shelter near 9th Avenue, following volunteers' accounts of the possible whereabouts of the man who had saved him. He walked among people in hardship, observing the daily lives of those living on society's margins. Every face he saw, every gesture of resilience reminded him of Elliot. Elliot, meanwhile, noticed the increasing presence of unfamiliar people watching the streets. He stayed alert, analyzing patterns and movements, but didn't change his routine. There was a quiet curiosity, a feeling that something was shifting, that the life he thought he knew was about to change in unexpected ways. The bond between them, still invisible, began forming in small moments. Lucas studying Elliot's world without realizing, Elliot observing the indirect impact of Lucas's actions around him. It was a delicate dance of intentions, gestures, and consequences, where each man's actions influenced the other, even though they hadn't met again yet. And so in Manhattan's silent alleys and illuminated streets, two worlds, so different, so distant, began to draw closer. Lucas searched actively, driven by gratitude and curiosity. Elliot acted, driven by instinct and justice. Fate seemed to be preparing the stage for their inevitable reunion, promising challenges, intense emotions, and a turning point that would change both of their lives forever. In the quiet alleys and bright streets, an invisible connection grew, waiting for the moment when these two men's paths would cross again, with consequences neither could have foreseen. The reunion took place on a cold afternoon, as the city's shadows began to stretch with the setting sun. Lucas had followed clues for weeks, investigating every shelter, every street, every volunteer's account. His determination was intense. He knew that finding Elliot wasn't just a matter of gratitude, but of completing a cycle that had begun on that dangerous night. Elliot, meanwhile, was sitting at his usual corner, observing the flow of the street. In the previous weeks, he had noticed an increase in the presence of strange people discreetly searching for him. Although he was used to being invisible, there was something different about these watchful eyes, something his instincts recognized as important. When Lucas finally approached, Elliot noticed the warmth of determination in the young millionaire's eyes. There was something in his posture that showed this wasn't idle curiosity or financial interest. It was a genuine search for connection and recognition. Elliot stood up slowly, analyzing every movement. "You're the man from that night?" Lucas asked, his voice carrying a mix of emotion, fear, and relief. Elliot hesitated, studying Lucas. He could sense the young man's sincerity, but he also knew that revealing himself carried risks. After a moment, he simply nodded slowly, confirming without words. Lucas took a deep breath and continued, I had to find you. Not just to say thank you, but to understand how someone can be so brave without expecting anything in return." Elliot remained silent for a few moments. Words had never been his way. Actions spoke louder. But for the first time in a long while, he felt he could let his guard down, even if just a little. In the days that followed, Lucas began to carefully involve Elliot in his life. He understood that Elliot had his own routine, and that public recognition could be harmful. So, he offered help in subtle ways: food, clothes, a safe place to stay when the cold became unbearable. Elliot, initially cautious, accepted some of this help hesitantly. He had never asked for anything before, and receiving help felt strange, almost uncomfortable. But Lucas didn't push. He simply offered, always respecting Elliot's dignity. The reunion began to transform them both. Lucas started to understand that wealth and power could never replace humanity. Each of Elliot's stories, every detail of his life on the streets, revealed strength he had never imagined, humility money could never buy, and courage that knew no limits. Elliot, in turn, began to see that not everyone in the world of wealth was shallow or selfish. Lucas represented a genuine connection, an opportunity to show that even someone invisible could be part of something greater. Small moments of mutual learning began to emerge. Lucas helped Elliot with practical daily issues, but he also learned to listen, to observe, to understand life outside the comfort of penthouses and luxury cars. Elliot, on the other hand, taught Lucas to value simple acts, to notice invisible details, and to recognize courage and kindness where no one else looked. One day, Elliot took Lucas to an alley near a shelter, showing him where street life unfolded. The hardships, the dangers, but also the small victories and gestures of solidarity that happened every day. Lucas was moved. Every corner, every face, every gesture was a lesson in humanity that no amount of money could teach. They began to share stories. Elliot spoke about his childhood, military service, and life on the streets. Lucas shared his family pressures, loneliness amidst luxury, and the suffocating expectations he faced. Each story deepened their connection, creating genuine empathy and understanding. The transformation was slow but constant. Elliot regained a sense of purpose that street life had long buried, while Lucas discovered values that money could never buy: courage, gratitude, humility, and true humanity. One day, Elliot looked at Lucas and said, "You've saved my view of the world too without even knowing it. You showed me that not everything is lost." Lucas smiled, deeply moved. "And you saved me from my own indifference. You made me see what truly matters." The city continued to pulse around them, alive and indifferent. But at that moment, in the quiet streets and golden-lit alleys of Sunset. Two worlds, the world of wealth and the world of invisibility, had met in a way that would change both of their lives forever. As weeks turned into months, their relationship deepened. Lucas, increasingly impressed by Elliot's courage, intelligence, and kindness, realized he was face to face with someone who not only saved his life, but who possessed a moral and human strength capable of inspiring anyone, regardless of status or wealth. One day, Lucas decided to introduce Elliot to opportunities that could change his life. He didn't want to simply reward the man who had saved him. He wanted to give him the chance to write a new chapter. Elliot, hesitant and cautious, initially refused. He was used to invisibility, independence, and life on the streets. The idea of depending on someone, even Lucas, felt foreign and uncomfortable. But Lucas didn't give up. He showed Elliot that there was dignity in accepting help and that doing so didn't diminish his courage or humanity. "You saved my life without thinking of anything but doing what was right. Now I want to help you do the same, but this time with the safety and opportunities you deserve." Elliot, still uncertain, began to consider the possibility. He accepted Lucas's offer to stay somewhere safe for a few days, not out of obligation, but to rest, recover from the cold, and regain his strength. In that protected space, Elliot began to realize the impact Lucas and his world could have on his life. In the following days, Lucas introduced Elliot to homeless support programs, philanthropic initiatives, and job training opportunities. Elliot began to engage not out of need, but out of calling. He discovered he could combine his street experience, courage, and intelligence to make a large-scale difference. The turning point came when Lucas invited Elliot to meet his family and closest team, not at a formal event, but in a quiet gathering where Elliot's value would be recognized genuinely without pretense. Nervous but willing, Elliot agreed. During this meeting, Elliot shared parts of his story: his childhood, military service, trauma, and life on the streets. His honesty deeply moved everyone, especially Lucas, who realized that Elliot's courage was not limited to one night, but was rooted in his entire life. The breakthrough came when Lucas, inspired by Elliot's courage and experience, decided to create a joint project, a support center for the homeless, combining Lucas's financial resources and logistics with Elliot's field knowledge. For the first time, Elliot felt he could use his skills and experiences to transform lives, not just survive. The impact was immediate. People Elliot knew from the streets began receiving support, jobs, training, medical care, and opportunities that once seemed impossible. Elliot, once invisible, became a figure of hope, not only inspiring those on the streets but also motivating other millionaires to join the cause. Lucas, in turn, realized that his experience with Elliot had transformed his understanding of wealth and responsibility. He understood that money without empathy is empty, and that true influence lies in how you impact lives with courage, attention, and compassion. One day, as they walked through the streets that were once filled with danger and abandonment, Elliot looked at Lucas and said, "You gave me something I never thought I'd have again. A second chance to make a difference. Not for recognition, but because it's right." Lucas smiled, moved. "And you taught me something money could never buy. The value of courage, empathy, and humanity. Together we can change lives." The center opened on a cold morning, but the sun illuminated the city's facades. People Elliot knew from the streets were there, some with tears in their eyes, others with shy smiles. Everyone recognized in some way the man who had once dared to save a millionaire heir and was now, through courage and experience, saving many others. The act that began on that freezing November night became a story of hope, resilience, and deep human impact. Elliot found purpose and dignity. Lucas discovered that wealth and empathy could coexist to create real change. By the end of the day, as the sun set and Manhattan breathed its golden light, both men looked at the horizon, knowing that their reunion was not just about gratitude or reward. It was about transformed lives, lessons learned, and the certainty that courage and humanity can emerge from the most unexpected places. Elliot, now with new opportunities, no longer felt invisible. Lucas, inspired and renewed, understood that true wealth lies in impacting lives with kindness, courage, and generosity. Together, they had proven that even from opposite worlds, connection, empathy, and doing what's right can transform not only individuals but entire communities. Weeks turned into months, and Elliot and Lucas's lives were never the same again. The support center they built became a beacon of hope, offering resources, training, and care to those once invisible to the city. Elliot, who once walked the streets with caution and distrust, now moved with confidence and purpose. Every person he helped, every story of resilience he witnessed, reminded him that courage and empathy are transformative forces. He didn't need recognition or wealth to understand his worth. His life now carried real and tangible meaning. Lucas, on the other hand, experienced a new dimension of humanity. Wealth, which once felt like a burden, became a powerful tool to change lives. He learned that money without purpose doesn't fill emotional voids, and that true greatness lies in acting with empathy and courage. The two men, from opposite worlds, discovered that human connection can transcend status, experiences, and circumstances, uniting lives in unexpected ways. Elliot taught Lucas that true life is found in small gestures, in risks taken out of love for others, in seeing value where society refuses to look. Lucas taught Elliot that individual courage can be transformed into collective impact. On a winter night, as the center closed its doors and the city lights reflected on the snow, Elliot and Lucas walked together through now familiar streets. Every corner, every alley, every person benefiting from the center reminded them that even small acts done right can create waves of change. "I never imagined something as simple as saving someone could spark such a massive transformation," Lucas said, looking at Elliot with genuine gratitude. Elliot smiled. "And I never imagined someone who seemed so distant from my world could show me the power of believing in others, of creating something bigger than ourselves." The city continued its frantic rhythm, but for them, a new awareness had taken root. Every life holds potential for change. Every choice matters, and every act of courage or kindness echoes far beyond the moment it happens. The story of Elliot and Lucas became an inspiration, a reminder that life can change in unexpected ways, that a single act of courage can save not just a physical life, but also reignite hope and transform destinies, that heroes can come from invisible places, and together, they can create lasting, meaningful impact. To everyone watching this story, the message is clear. Never underestimate the power of an act of kindness, courage, or empathy. You may not realize it at the moment, but your actions can change lives in unimaginable ways. And if you were touched by this story, if Elliot's courage and Lucas's determination inspired you, I invite you to become part of this community. Subscribe to the channel to follow more emotional stories like this. Stories that prove courage, empathy, and resilience exist in the most unexpected places. Also, we'd love to know where you're watching from. Leave a comment with your city and state so we can connect with people from everywhere who also believe in the power of humanity and transformation. Remember, every gesture counts, every choice matters, and you too can be part of stories that change lives. Elliot and Lucas showed us that even in the most unlikely circumstances, courage and kindness can create miracles, transform destinies, and inspire generations. Thank you for following this journey. And remember, the next act of courage could start with you.